everybody, and welcome to another live sessions with a GM. It is me and two others making three. So there you are. That's your counting lesson for the day. Right, I'm joined by two fantastic gentlemen who were responsible for, or are responsible for, something that got me super, super excited. So excited that we changed the videos that we were going to do. We're talking about Maximum Apocalypse. Now, it's done the rounds. Nerdarchy's already done their playthrough of it, which was awesome. If you haven't watched that, go and check it out on their channel. And I believe I'm going to be playing it at some point next week as well. So that's going to be fun. But we thought, hey, let's bring everybody on board who helped create this, because there have been a lot of questions recently about how do you go about putting something into print, also about the apocalypse setting. I mean, it's not something that comes up very often. And so they've joined us and they're going to talk about that. So we've got Scott, who I believe created the rules.
Yeah, that's correct.
Based on the board game that Michael created.
Correct.
And together they have created Maximum Apocalypse. Now that's an amazing collaboration in my experience. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about apocalypse settings, and of course we are talking about your questions. And if you do have a question, whether it's related to Maximum Apocalypse or to publishing or whatever, or if it's your RPG question, as usual, type the word question in caps lock in the front of your question, please, that I can see it. It is scrolling along down there, so you can see how quickly they go by. But remember, caps lock in front, big giant word question, and then I will ask it and we will take it from there. And then at the end of today's show, I will be reviewing another of the entries into the Circle of World Builders Masterclass 2020 event as we go through that adventure. So it's a full show. I see everyone is here. Everyone's nice and warm by the looks of things. I think everyone's in the Northern Hemisphere who joins and watches this show. So yeah, it's been quite a nice day here in the UK as well. All right, so whilst we wait for some questions to start coming through, I think everyone's sort of warming up to it. Michael, Scott, why don't you guys tell us how Maximum Apocalypse came about? Because you were telling me a little bit earlier on. So just tell me that story again.
I guess I'll start on the board game part of it, and then Scott can take over on the RPG part. I love post-apocalyptic everything. I love TV shows. I love movies. And I think that there's a lot of differences between them. I mean, even among like zombie shows, there's a lot of different like takes and styles. And when I was working on, a board game, I wanted to be cooperative, and I felt like that was a genre that hadn't been represented. And I literally just started in Excel and listed like a zillion different apocalypse ideas. I always had this idea of like your job in the real world, like what it was before things fell. Like that was the character class of the people in the board game. So, you know, if you were a surgeon or doctor before, like how would that, you would obviously have those skills, but you're also going to have other things like Molotov cocktails you need to be able to make with your chemistry and throw and burn monsters with. So I just started making this huge list, and it was like super exciting. And then I started working on the board game, which took me like 2 years to develop and eventually take to Kickstarter. And from the Kickstarter, I guess that inspired Scott, who was interested enough in the world, because this is a world where all the apocalypses sort of happen in different regions of the world all at the same time, or overlap one another. So, you know, the game was built to sort of be fun. I mean, the title itself, which some people hate, is sort of meant to be a little absurdist and humorous, because having a maximum apocalypse with, you know, 2 or 3 apocalypses happening at the same time is ridiculous. But the game allowed you to be modular. You can mix up a deck of, you know, aliens with a deck of zombies and fight them. So lucky enough, Scott sort of picked up on that when he made the RPG.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how it went down. Like the board game, I was thinking, man, this is a really cool world. Like there's only one way this could have happened, and that was like for all of these apocalypses to have occurred. So I was like, hey, I sent an email. I was like, hey, Mike, have you ever thought about making like an RPG? Like this would be a great RPG world, right? Because that world building aspect was there. And the response was like, yeah, you know, I don't really know anything about that. And I was like, well, I know a lot about that. Like I could send you something. And he was like, okay, send me something. So then for the next year, like I made some rules. I threw them at my friends. I like forced a bunch of friends. I think some might even be in the comments right now. I forced them to play my game and like test it. And then after a year, I threw it. I sent it back to Mike. I was like, okay, this is what I got. What do you think? And I basically just wanted to see if I could like take the board game and like make it into an RPG. Like, how do I make, the monster spawning rules like happen? And how do I make like the scavenging stuff? How do I make that into something that like matters for character development, And so I was just trying to like take all those things and make them work. And then like I had the thing. And to be fair, the thing I sent Mike was not even what is now in Kickstarter. It was there were some major differences, but like, thanks to like Mike's involvement, Todd's involvement, like discussions and collaborations, we came up with like changes that worked great, especially when I put them in front of people and they're like, this is really cool. I feel like I'm part of what's going on. And I feel like I'm, part of the team. And even though like, say it's like, I'm a non-combat character, but we're in combat, I feel like I'm still participating. So like we made the game based on that. So it was really cool to like turn that board game into an RPG.
Yeah. I was to my credit, I am not a big RPGer, but I knew that what Scott sent me, there was something there. And lucky for me, I had some friends and trusted confidants who I could sort of get into the nitty gritty of it. I mean, I knew what Scott sent me was was robust and he put a lot of work into it, but not being a very heavy RPG player, I didn't really understand if it was interesting or different or if it was just a reskin of another thing. I've played like Dungeons and Dragons a couple times and Pathfinder, had a terrible experience with Pathfinder at a PAX, which really turned me off to RPGs, honestly. So I was very happy when I finally got around to playing Maximum Apocalypse RPG, that a lot of the elements that I didn't like, or a lot of elements that I heard Scott and Todd talking about that they wanted to sort of approach the RPG market with, because I mean they would get together and talk about like things I had never heard of. Like they were talking like another language sometimes, like at Origins last year. I was like, I have no idea what's going on.
I remember it, like it was funny because we were talking about something. I look over at Mike and he was just kind of like, huh?
It so often happens like that. We get lost in this wonderful world. We've got a question here from Kinori, and I don't know the answer to this, so I don't know. How does Maximum Apocalypse compare or contrast to Apocalypse World, both thematically and systematically? Have you ever heard of Apocalypse World, Scott? Or
I have. In fact,
definitely not.
I haven't.
Oh, really? Okay.
No.
Well, when I was like, first thing is if you're going to make a game, you have to kind of research what other games already exist. I think that's like step one. And if people haven't done that, if they're like, I'm going to make a game, but I don't know if that game already exists, then they're almost stepping in the wrong way. So yeah, I went out and like found all the Apocalypse games I could find. In Apocalypse World, obviously you type in Apocalypse RPG and Apocalypse World comes up, right? So I tried to read that and get behind it, but basically, from what I gathered, I've never actually played Apocalypse World. I've only like read the rule book, but it seems to be a game that's sort of very rules light, and kind of like the Apocalypse is like the setting. Like there was the fall of humanity was the setting, but like as far as the people's interaction with it, it's just really more of the setting. They're like doing their own sort of stories amongst characters and dealing with other humans that are like, that have devolved into, cannibals and stuff. And then the game system uses like I think it's a 2d6 if I remember correctly. It's, you do have all these moves and things that you do. It's very rules light. It's like City of Mist, I think is like the same kind of system, or Dungeon World is the same kind of system. But in Maximum Apocalypse, like the one thing is first off, all of the apocalypses, like they've all happened and they're all currently still happening. So all of the monsters that like were part of that, like the aliens and the zombies and the kaiju and the, killer robots, they're all over. They're still around. They're still doing stuff. You'll run into them all the time. And so you come face to face like with those apocalypse events and sort of like the people that caused the apocalypse, which is like different from Apocalypse World, right? Like there's like a side story that's happening, but like then they're also like the players. But in this, like you can do that. You can focus on players all you want, but then you also have, those monsters rolling around. And so that's a big difference. And then the other difference is that it's a D100 system versus like a 2D6 system. And then there's a little bit of more granularity when it comes to the rules, like the skill uses and stuff like that. But it just gives you the opportunity to do cool things like I'm gonna repair that guy's armor while I'm doing stuff, and that's a skill that you have. That's an ability that you can do with your skills. So it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more to it than Sensei Apocalypse World, and there's a lot more interaction with the monsters, as it were.
And I'm just busy looking at the PDF now, looking for all of the different types of apocalypse. I think there's 12. It says 12. There's alien.
Yeah. So like there's a whole bunch. Let me see if I can.
Alien. There's kaiju. There's nuclear. There's oil. There's one called food, which is food
I think there's 11. I think is the total.
Yeah. Robots.
Well, the number in the board game is different than the RPG too, because Scott came up with some that aren't represented in the board game or aren't represented yet. And I think there's some in the board game that Scott hasn't added to the RPG yet as well.
Yeah, there were some that I just kind of sort of rolled up into another apocalypse, so they became like one apocalypse. It's like there's not like a separate yokai apocalypse. It's just like supernatural horrors includes like vampires and yokai, right? Like
right. No, absolutely. But I was blown away. I was reading. It's like, okay, so which apocalypse do you play? And it's like, no. You play them all. I'm like, what? What is this?
Which apocalypse don't you play?
Exactly, right. And it's like, well, yes. What's the plural for apocalypse? Well, technically there can only be one, but no, not anymore. So I really like that. So there you are, Kanori. I hope that answers your question. I think also something that I really liked about Maximum Apocalypse was that your component system was just genius. It was absolutely inspired. So I don't know where that came from, but I read that and I was like, oh my God, yes! This is it. This is how we solve that problem. This is really how we solve that problem. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Just to elaborate a little bit, everything can be turned into a component, and then you use components to build stuff. And it's as simple as that. You don't have to describe in detail the spark plug that you need to get the alternator working, to get the machine working, to get no, who cares? We're not survivalists. We don't know that kind of stuff, right? So it's difficult to role play. So there is a question here that Daz Dark asks, and that is, as a new dungeon master, I often find it difficult when describing locations. Any tips on how to be more descriptive, but without going in depth? But I think I'm okay when it comes to describing combat. So I do think that's a good question, because when I was reading Max Apocalypse, I was going, okay, this is very much just after the apocalypse has happened. This is like ground zero, day 2, day 3, day 4 type of stuff. Because as you say, the apocalypse stuff is still going on.
Yeah. So
what advice would you give to Daz Dark in terms of describing locations when running any RPG, but when running an RPG?
Well, I think that the first thing is to sort of consider, it partially depends on whether or not you have, you're using maps, right? Maps help with visuals, but if you're describing them, if you're doing theater of the mind stuff, or if you're wanting to describe the map more, the key thing is to think of 3 major things that you think are make the feel or the mood of the place. Like if you're going to say, okay, this is a bombed out house, right? You're going to be there's this sort of broken, shambling foundation of the house. That's one. And then there's exposed wires. That'd be a second one. And then maybe just a bunch of random bits of broken debris everywhere. And so you have 3 things right there that you can go okay, so I'm going to focus on those things to describe the space. And then outside of that, when it gets to other things, it just that's, if you want to include, okay, there's also a door that goes into another room, which leads to a different place, right? And then that'll lead to the next place you want them to go. Or if someone's I'm going to look around to see if I find trapdoors, you can either have said that, or as Mike noticed in one of the games I ran, yes, of course there's a trapdoor. Wing it. But basically sort of focus on 3 major things that you think describe that space. I think that's the easiest way. And then you don't have to keep track of a ton of stuff for every room. You don't have to go into a long 10-minute explanation on the space or the room. You can just be okay, so this is what you find. You walk in, it's dark, it's damp, and there's moss growing on the walls. And that is enough, I think.
I think you touched on something good too, Scott, which is if you want to add anything more than that, it should sort of be a hint or a push towards where the story's going or what you want the players to do.
I agree. I was going to ask Michael, in terms of, because were you involved in the visuals? I haven't seen the board game. How do the visuals compare between the book and the board game artistically?
The book uses almost all the visuals from the board game.
Okay.
We have been commissioning additional comic book artists to do some like extra pieces.
Right.
But the stuff you saw and a lot of the early stuff is all from our library of board game art and all the cards and stuff we have. So
yeah, how did you guys align that in terms of the artist does something for you? Basically, they're describing a space for you visually, and then how did you then go, yeah, this works for us, or no, this is too sci-fi, or it's maybe not apocalypse enough? Were you involved in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I always say when people, like, I'm demoing the game at conventions, people are like, oh my gosh, I love the art. Like, you know, congratulations on the art. It's so great. I'm like, well, I would love to take credit for that. I found the artist who drew all that stuff and told him what to draw, but that's about all the credit I can take for it. I would say, you know, I don't know if I've just been really lucky or if I've been doing enough that I find artists well, but you know, Gustav Rangmar is the good fellow who has done most of the art for the board game so far. And I met him by posting a job online and getting sent hundreds and hundreds of applications. And I basically sifted through all those, looking at people's portfolios, and I do an art test. So I have like a description of what I want drawn. And in the case of Maximum Apocalypse, I actually remember that it was the fireman. The original fireman character is sort of what I sent to all of the artists that I wanted drawn. And I had like a brief, you know, sentence description of sort of what I wanted, describing this post-apocalyptic thing. I want like a graphic novel, comic book look. You know, his previous job was a fireman, but now his stuff's sort of broken down because the apocalypse has happened. He's been using it a long time, and you know, that's sort of what he is. And you know, I got a bunch of different submissions, and with those submissions, you get sort of quotes and pricing, and then you just sort of negotiate from there and talk it out. And you know, since Gustav's obviously worked out great, I love his stuff, and I mean, we've gotten to the point now where, yeah, so that was the first piece of art ever done for that firefighter. Is the first piece of art ever done for the Maximum Apocalypse universe. And we actually have the Crazed Fireman, which I think Scott probably knows about. Yep. Is actually my second choice. They're like my second favorite artist. I pay people to do the art tests, even if they don't get the job. They don't have to do a drawing for nothing.
Right.
And I liked the second person who almost got the job so much that I still used their fireman, who looked a little crazier. He looked a little more unhinged, so I didn't feel he was as good of as a player character. So he's actually a promo from the first Kickstarter, and he's like the fireman goes crazy and he's a boss now. And that's a promo card from the board game. So yeah, that's how we find the art.
It was funny because one time we were playing through the board game, my friends and I were playing through the board game, and we actually came to that point where like there's like the card where like the fireman becomes crazed or whatever. He's now an enemy. We had a player playing the fireman, so he was like, "Oh, okay, well I guess I just give up my character and I'll take another one, I guess." So we had this moment where he's like, "I guess I turned on all of you guys, so like." Sucks to be you.
There we go. We got some other questions now. If we turn our attention to we'll talk a bit more about Max Apocalypse shortly, or Maximum Apocalypse, I should say.
Sure, yeah.
So we've got one question here from Scorpio, who says, "Do you feel that one should add in dull moments or locations to emphasize the exciting ones, or should things be universally exciting?"
I mean, I don't know if Mike wants to try to answer this or not.
I can answer some of this, or at least my preference. I mean, yeah. I would say that I think you do need to have, I mean, not dull. It all depends on sort of what you find exciting, right? So in the context of most RPGs I've played, what I like is I tend to like combat because I feel like the rules are a little more stringent and straightforward, and it's more like a board game, quote unquote, where there's a clear like win and lose condition. So I find those to be very exciting and engaging. But I would hate to play an RPG or a story that's just fight after fight after fight after fight. That's not interesting. So I would say you do need duller moments, or you need different moments. I mean, they don't necessarily. Some people may find them more exciting than other things. You just need varied experiences, I think, throughout the story. And one of the things I personally like about Maximum Apocalypse as a player is that the D100 system allows for very quick storytelling in the dull moments. You're making progress, you're crafting things, but it doesn't take that long. And then I feel like when you get to a combat moment, you feel not only the threat of like your life being in danger, but it snaps. The rule set definitely feels like it changes, and it snaps into a system where instead of the GM, in my case, Scott's been the GM almost every time I've played. Scott is sitting there, instead of being like, what do you guys want to do? And just being very open for him, he switches to like, here's your initiative. Mike, you're up first. Like, what are you doing, in this fight? Like, the zombie's coming at your throat. What are you going to do? And it's like, well, I would really like the big bulky guy to help me, but he doesn't act yet. So I guess I'll do something else. And I definitely feels like that creates the excitement and the tension. But again, I have limited RPG experience, but that's just my take as like a storyteller, game designer.
I mean, I think you hit it like right on the mark. Like that's exactly right. Like you do want to have like not exciting, chasey, combat-y moments to emphasize the combat, but those moments don't have to be like boring, right? They can be things like, okay, we're not in a fight now, so we're gonna try to patch up some of the the damage we've taken. We're gonna try to travel like away from this place so that we don't get it like hit again or something. Who knows what's gonna happen in the next 5 minutes. And you want to like have like other actions happen. And sometimes people will just sit there and not do anything. There was one of the playtests during the campaign playtests that I ran, where the players had gone down into like an underground tunnel area to like rescue some people that had been kidnapped, and they were standing to like the entrance of this cave, and they were like talking about their plan. And so there was like a whole hour of game time where they were talking about their plan. So I kept like throwing random monsters at them because they were just standing there talking, and they'd fight it and they'd kill it, and then they would just keep standing there. And so I'm like, okay, I'll wait another like 5 minutes and I'll throw another like zombie at you guys. And so it turned into this weird thing where they eventually realized, oh, maybe we shouldn't just stand here and do nothing. Maybe we should figure out what we're actually going to do and start doing it. But like those moments do allow them to like think, okay, what am I doing? I'm not just fighting all the time. I'm not just running all the time. I'm not just driving this Mad Maxian, truck through the desert the whole time. Like even in films, you have those sort of like up and down moments, and you do have to do that in a game to keep it flowing. But there's a whole lot of stuff about how to go in and out of those moments and how to make them exciting. And if you want to know more, just watch this channel.
Well, wait, now do I have to pay you for promotion? Oh, God. You both hit it on the head. I also think that one doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't plan to have this is going to be a dull moment. I would plan to have this is a social moment. So if you look at the 5-step sheet that is available on our website, where we talk about there's a social and there's a combat. In the 5 beats or the 5 movements of an adventure. If you're watching this channel and the process that we recommend you go through, that social is where people are talking. It's where PCs are talking to each other. And just to share a little story, because you guys are going to get to see this later on, so it's not a spoiler, but it's something that's quite interesting. I was running the Star Wars game last week, Friday, for the Patreons, and they came to a 10-foot gap. Okay? Admittedly, it was a 10-foot gap over some dangerous surface. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll have to watch the show to find out. That 10-foot gap, I had planned that they were just going to jump across. 45 minutes later, folks, they had nearly died about 4 times. There was one player where we were even trying to find dice rolls that he could make to try and keep his character alive. It was meant to just be a slight obstacle, but the players made it so much more interesting, and they do what they need to do. I see there's a confession there from one of the guys in chat. If you're on Twitch, a certain individual says, "Hello, it's me, the Jedi who fell." But you didn't die. You didn't die. Anyway, it was an absolute wonderful moment. And for me, That is stuff that I totally love, where you have no idea how it's going to change. So don't plan for the dull, but plan to have downtime. You want a kind of a wave of energy, and then more energy, and then less energy from you. Another way to think about it, a very easy way of thinking about it, is reaction time versus planning time. Reaction time is combat, where the characters are reacting to combat. So they're just going through combat. They're kind of trying to stay alive. They're trying to defeat the outcome. Planning time is where there is nothing happening, and they are then afforded the opportunity to plan or go shopping or do whatever it is that they want to do in the RPG. So try and weave a balance between the two. Next question, and this one comes with a personalized shout out. So Jake Chris Ferryman says, how hard should I play up the tropes of a given apocalypse? Should the aliens all have War of the Worlds, walkers, or flying saucers? Also, hi, Scott.
Yes. No, so yeah, no, I mean, the aliens, it's really a matter of how much you want to do. And you know, it's funny that so the fact is that I know him quite well. He's a very close friend of mine. So that's how, when you said his name, I was like, oh, I know who that is. Hey. Anyway, no, when you're doing something like with the aliens and stuff, when it's any monsters, really, you can play it as strongly as you want. Do you want it to be a very like big, explosive War of the Worlds style like event that happened? It doesn't even have to be like the whole campaign, just like you want to have an event. Then yeah, you would add all of the UFOs and the prancers and the tripod things and the blasters and everything. But then at the same time, if you want it to be something like small and subtle and quiet, then you have like one predator creeping in the trees following the party as they're walking around. Absolutely. It's really up to like how big do you want it to be, and it could even start with one and then become the other, right? Like it doesn't have to be both at the same time. Like they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, you can do both.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But so it's really like how big do you want it? And in Maximum Apocalypse, it can go both ways. Like you can do either one. And I think a lot of people think, because like Mike was saying with the name, even it sort of lends itself to be a little bit more pulpy. And you're like, I'm going to do like a big, crazy, aliens taking over and like and that's fine. It's totally fine. The special abilities and the skills all lend that, to the game. You can
I mean, you could very easily do, and you could also do a much more grounded campaign that's based on one apocalypse. It's not that, I mean, the system is there just like the board game for people to play and use however they want. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be player driven, even the board game, that was always the intention, was for it to be very modular, player driven, cooperative game. And luckily an RPG lends itself to that sort of design in a board game pretty well.
There we go. Michael, where can we find that board game?
We actually just got it back in stock literally a few weeks ago. So we are all stocked up from our website, rockmanorgames.com, if you want to buy directly from us.
Sorry, that was
rockmanorgames.com.
Gotcha. I'm bringing
and
it
if you click there's like a shop link. If you go to the shop, you'll see the board game.
Gotcha.
We have the Legendary Edition, which is all the expansions in one box. And but we also have the base game and all the expansions individually in stock as well. And we just got those games, which came in this past week. We just got those games to our distributor this week. So basically the distributor gets it, then they're going to email all the stores that say, hey, guess what? We got this back in stock. And stores will eventually, I know stores have been sold out a long time, probably about a year at this point because of COVID and everything. Because our reprint was stuck for the main board game, was stuck there for a while. But all stores should eventually be getting their games in the next 30 days.
Well, and if you're lucky, your friendly local game shop may actually have it. Mine does. Every time I go in there, I always go to like the board game section, and they're alphabetically listed. So I always go in and like look for like M, and then like I find it. It's usually there. There's like one, either the main box or like the expansion, but never both at the same time. And they never have both at the same time.
They should soon. They should have like a decent stock very soon.
Yeah.
A technical question, and I'm not entirely sure on this one myself. I know from a literary perspective the answer to this question, but Dragon says, in publishing art within a work, are there or what, if any, are the differences between paying a living artist using art that is over 100 years old or older? Does copyright extend on artwork?
Well, I actually I feel like I can answer this somewhat because I do
You
know
should be able to answer it better than me.
that I actually know this from another Kickstarter I follow, which there's a Kickstarter called El Dorado or the Island of El Dorado or something, and he got all of his artwork for free from like the New York Metropolitan Museum has like basically a database, and Wikipedia has a database of like artwork that's just from really old artists that has been, the copyright is extinguished. It's like basically public knowledge, public works. So there's definitely artworks that you can tap into to utilize in a game or a book or etc. And because that Dorado game was like the Renaissance period, he used like a lot of like Renaissance art, you know, with people, conquistadors and like metal helmets and stuff.
Right.
So I know from following that Kickstarter and sort of finding, like looking at the art and being like, this art looks like art I see in a museum. And then reading into it a little bit more, he had like a note about where he got that art. So I actually know that from that. And we actually used some free art as well in our art forgery case in Lawyer Up, which was on Kickstarter back in March. We commissioned plenty of art that we paid for too, but the art that they're forging are famous pieces of art that were in the public domain.
Yeah.
So you can certainly use that stuff. Obviously, when you're if you're paying a current artist who's who's made stuff in the past 50 years, you probably need to either license it or pay them and commission them to draw what you want to draw. In our case, we typically have art descriptions and we're like, draw a fireman in the apocalypse, draw a surgeon who survived an alien invasion, draw aliens coming after you. I would want them to look like this. That's typically how we do it. But, for example, a popular board game that licensed the artwork is a game called Scythe. So Jamie Stigmeyer, actually, that artist had been doing all these pieces of mechs and art and everything. And Jamie liked it and said, hey, man, I want to use this artwork in my board game. Can I just license it from you? And he paid whatever percent or whatever to use it in the board game. And he didn't have to, I mean, maybe even some pieces were commissioned as part of that. But the fact that Scythe has so much artwork because it's licensed. Like the encounter deck is like 100 cards of unique art, and that's crazy. And it's because the artist had already had it done.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know of one person that wrote a full like module like by themselves, and they like it was part of like a thing, and they put it out there. And it was based on it was called like Fungal Boogie, and it was based on the dancing fungus disease thing from like I can't remember the Renaissance period, anyway, Dark Ages, whatever. Anyway, there's like a painting someone drew or like painted of that time, and he just got that because it's in the public domain because it's like 400 years old, and he just used that as like the cover of this like module, and he's had no problems, no legal issues, no one said anything. So
look, I think things also are changing. I know with literary work, it also depends on what country you're in as well, because I know that when it comes to text, different countries have different expiry dates, and they quite broad. I know, for example, in South Africa, if your work was written 75 years ago or more, it's considered public domain. But in the UK, I believe it's 100 years, and I think in the US it's 125. So there's lots or maybe
it used to be a lot less in the United States, but the Disney Corporation has drastically changed.
Well, they would have to. They would have to, because these companies are now getting to the point where they're older than the copyright laws, which means suddenly their material becomes public domain.
Mickey Mouse has been a big thing. When he was like entering public domain, there was a big change in the laws here.
So you have to be aware of that, and then things like Getty's Images and that sort of thing, where they have commissioned artists or photographers to go and specifically make imagery, which they then sell. Those won't have an expiry, provided that the corporation is still in existence. So it does become a little bit complicated, but I completely understand why you would want to look at using that kind of stuff as well. And if you're writing for the DMs Guild, so if you're writing a Dungeons and Dragons module that you will release in the DMs Guild exclusively and only, you then also get access to the D&D
Right.
art library, but then you are restricted to releasing it just in that. Okay.
You can't put it out anywhere else. Yeah.
No, exactly right. Exactly right. So, all right. Watcher2417 says, is there a gardening class? I have no idea what you're talking about there. Let refine that question, please. Or I don't know, eat a banana.
Is that a question about if there's a gardener archetype in Maximum Apocalypse? Because the answer is there's no like gardener archetype, but there is like some other archetypes in the wings that may end up in the RPG. Like,
well, there we go.
Kind of similar. You've got
well, gardening will be a very important thing post-apocalypse, I would imagine.
Yeah, it'd be like a farming thing. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Edward Horsman has a question for us. As a new GM, I'm struggling to drop plot hooks to my players about my puppeteer big bad through his villains. What can I do to let my players know about the big bad without being obvious? Do you guys handle that kind of situation?
I mean, again, I would go to like experience with books and like literary works, because I think you're basically talking about foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like writing a novel type thing. And I haven't written one of those, but that is the path I would go down if I wanted to improve on that. I would look at, maybe like murder mysteries, like
yeah, great.
and how they foreshadow stuff.
Sure. Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Harry Potter with like Voldemort. I don't know.
Do you know the whole Voldemort thing? I never got that from the movies. I must have been thick. I know I was drunk for one of the movies. To my shame, it was the only feature film I've ever watched whilst inebriated, and it happened because the film was late. But the Voldemort thing for me, I must admit, was a surprise. I hadn't read the books, so I was just watching the movies. I'm like, what the hell's the Horcrux? What's that? Where does that come from? I don't know.
I read the books just a few years ago because I finally got tired of like only having like information from the movies and like trying to talk to people. And I was like, this is clearly something like bigger than I thought it was. So I went ahead and read the books. And there's a little bit more. There's a little bit more of like a thread throughout the entire series in the books that like gives you more hints to like Voldemort's like coming back kind of thing. So. But no, I think that's right. I think like murder mysteries do a good job because they sort of help you. Like they're like there's red herrings and stuff. Like I think like murder mysteries and like noir stories, like the noir detective stories, give you a really good understanding on like how to write in general, because those tend to like, okay, there's certain rules, we have to follow them, but we're gonna do a good job like in the beginning. We may even show you the big bad in like the very first paragraph of this book, and then later we're gonna bring it up again, and you didn't see that coming. So they do fine. Yes. But like sometimes your subtle hints they'll just slip past your characters. Jake Chris Ferryman was in a campaign I ran many years ago. Just throw back to the guys that where I had these bads that were in the background, and there were these other. So they were following a thread toward the bad guys, and then they got to the point where they thought, okay, we've cornered one, and then it turned out that was actually somebody who was helping them, and they had been looking at it all wrong. And it completely threw them off. So sometimes they're ready to like take on the big bad and then realize, oh wait, this is totally not. I just let them keep going down that road because it was fun. But,
absolutely, absolutely.
Sometimes they won't pick up on that and they'll miss like the subtle hints all over the place.
So I agree with both of you. The foreshadowing thing is fantastic, and if you want to see two very good examples of that. Is in the Sherlock Holmes novels. So Arthur Conan Doyle, when he was writing Sherlock Holmes, originally it was just episode. It was episodic. There was no major big bad. Life was just going on. But then as Sherlock Holmes became more popular, he started to realize that if he had a big nemesis against Sherlock, it would create a more tense moment, because Sherlock was outsmarting all of the villains. There was no one who could challenge him. So Conan Doyle did two things. One, he threw in the only villain ever to beat Sherlock Holmes was a woman, Irena Adler. He threw that in because at the time there was a big movement for women's rights and that sort of thing in the UK. But he also threw in one adventure called the Red-Headed League. There is, at the very end, John Clay, I'm a bit of a Sherlock Holmes fanatic, but at the very end, the villain is captured. And he says to Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty will not be impressed. And it's the first time that Moriarty is mentioned in the entire book series. And readers went ballistic. They couldn't figure out who it was. And then what he did was just slowly, over the next couple of novellas and magazine releases, mention things that Sherlock had defeated before, which had actually been set up by Moriarty. Mm-hmm. So the rule of five, I work with a rule of five. If you want to hint that the big bad is there, 5 clues are required to be given out. So it could be a piece of paper with the character's name on it. It could be the dying word of a character, an NPC who's been defeated by the players. So be subtle about it. The second example that I can give you, which is a little bit faster to look up than Sherlock Holmes, is in the original 3 Star Wars films, Emperor Palpatine didn't exist in the very first film. He was a single sentence. The Emperor has disbanded the Senate. Governors now have direct control. Blah, 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 blah. One little sentence mentioned that the Emperor had disbanded the Senate, and that was all that was needed. And in the second film, we still didn't see the Emperor except for one holographic conversation between Darth Vader and himself. And then in the third one, we realized, oh my goodness, he's been pulling all of these strings all along. So it's been a very interesting story. But again, in the films, they don't need to give us so many clues because as the audience was seeing what the evil guys are doing behind the scenes, whereas in role playing, we don't see that. So I would always suggest 5 clues, and that will get you on your way. GM Brightside says, are you going over any cow submissions today? Yes, I am at the end of the show as usual, so I will be doing that. Stay with me for that. D Papana says, what should I keep in mind whilst introducing the big bad? Let's look at this from two. Well, actually, I see there's also a question for Michael coming up. So, very quickly, Scott, what should you keep in mind when introducing the big bad?
That's a good question. It depends on like when you're introducing the big bad. Are you talking about like early on, or are you talking about like at the moment where we're gonna have like the final showdown, right? These are 2 different times, and I guess the one thing to keep in mind is always leave a sort of mystery to the players about whether or not they're going to overcome this particular challenge. Like, if players automatically start off going, "Oh yeah, we can easily defeat this," then if they do suddenly, there's like, yeah, I expected that. This is not climactic, whatever. But if they're never quite sure, or if they think they can beat the big bad and then like they go shling with their attack and the big bad just kind of waves it away, and they're like, oh, okay, this was totally not what we were expecting. Then it creates this mystery for them, and they're not sure, and that builds the tension in the players. Because the thing is, like, building the tension in the story is really building the tension at the table with your players to make sure that they, as a player, are feeling that tension and not just the characters feeling the tension. And that's where the role play aspect happens, where they become like in sync with their character, because the character is afraid and they're afraid, and that's when the moment happens. That's what I think. I think make sure you have mystery about whether or not they're going to get through that.
There you go. Michael, a question for you from a design standpoint. Did you go about, or what did you look at world building at all when you were originally conceiving of Max Apocalypse?
Well, I mean, I've heard the term world building before. I would not say
world anvil thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I researched world building in and of itself. Certainly not in any sort of RPG relationship. I really just went about making a game that I wanted to make. That's the luxury of being a small independent publisher. Ultimately, there was no marketing team or anything I had to answer to. But I guess, it's been a long time since I worked on that game. And I certainly knew of all the worlds in sort of the genre of post-apocalyptic, fiction. And I certainly wanted to fuse those all together. So I may have taken some shortcuts. I will say that I am working on a sci-fi board game that is modeled after, in a lot of ways, it's the spiritual successor to Maximum Apocalypse. So there'll be a lot of similar systems. There's a lot of new things as well. And I certainly have felt that going into this game, there's been more world building. So I guess it is something that I will take into account. In general, when it comes to board game design for me, in particular for my designs, theme and mechanics almost always come together. So I don't make, abstract Euros and these other types of games where you can sort of reskin them to be anything. I I almost always have a theme in mind, even if the world isn't completely solidified. I know the type of stuff I want in there, and the mechanics are always, they're going back and forth and evolving together. So whether it's a lawyer game where I know I want it to be like a head-to-head thing, prosecution and defense, and that's going to inform the mechanics, or if I know, I'm working on a sci-fi game and I know the sci-fi stuff I like. I like The Expanse. I like Battlestar Galactica. I like Star Wars. I'm less of a Star Trek guy.
Okay, the show's over. Thanks for participating, guys. You can all go now.
Listen, I don't dislike Star Trek. It's just I am not. Todd is a huge Star Trek guy.
The age-old battle.
Yeah, it's never spoken to me as much. And maybe that's because I like post-apocalyptic things. I like things a little grittier. Absolutely. And there's that whole utopian thing with Star Trek going on, which I think is very hopeful, but it doesn't pique my interest. It's like, they figured it all out.
Yeah, everything's cool. So, I like what you said though, because I think I agree with you very much. You choose your theme, and you build around that. And if it doesn't have to be complete, as long as it's serving your theme.
Correct. Yeah. So like, I'm like deep in the sci-fi game right now. So like one of the things that it has, obviously, that Maximum Apocalypse doesn't have is a large ship that you can fly around to different planets in. And it's similar to the van in some ways. If you played the Maximum Apocalypse board game, the van is like a small tile that you get to, and it just sort of is like as your way in and out. But the ship,
it's your start point for pieces.
But the ship in this game has multiple rooms with all sorts of different things that you would want on a ship in a sci-fi world. It has an engine room, it has a weapons room, it has a bridge, and you can move to those specific locations. It's not just the ship as a singular tile that encompasses everything, because that's not interesting. So that's like a way things can change, because the theme dictates it and needs it.
I like that. Eric Eziel says, I am planning, when planning a post-apocalyptic game, is focusing on fixing the apocalypse via whatever means necessary, and allowing the planet to return to itself, betraying the theme, or is it working within the theme?
Well, I personally think it's working within the theme. I guess it depends on what you want the theme to be. First off, that's the first thing, is as the game master and as the players, you kind of have to know what the theme is going to be. And sometimes it'll change. Sometimes you'll start off being like, I don't want them to fix the world, but then all your players, that's all they want to do is fix the world. So then that becomes the game's like major, campaign's major end goal. But so no, I think that it's both. Like it can be both. Like I don't think that actually like fixing the world is going against the post-apocalyptic thing. In fact, I think that's what the drive of the characters will be, even if that's not where you want it to end. And not to like, if you haven't seen the video that guy made, that was
Eric,
one of your
you
points.
haven't watched it, have you? No, you haven't.
Because that was one of the things. Yeah, you just exposed yourself, Eric. We know. But yeah, I think that like that's what the players are ultimately striving for. I mean, Maximum Apocalypse, like I could talk about that all day, but to throw that up there, like some apocalypse games like Mutant Year Zero, that is like one of the cores of the entire game is building up your arc and developing your city and that kind of stuff. And that's what the characters are doing. And if they don't have that background motivation, like if it's like you're never going to be able to build this world up and fix it, then they're not going to want to play. I think that'll fall apart relatively quickly. So even if you have this plan where like no matter how big they get, a kaiju is going to come in and smash their development, they should at least have that feeling like they are going to be able to do something and change things. That's my feeling, but I know that some other games are designed like to keep that from happening.
I think it's completely up to the GM, I can speak to the board game, but like obviously within the mission structure of some of the board game apocalypses, there is sort of a hopeful arc. Like, the zombie apocalypse is like about finding a scientist. Those first 3 missions in the board game are finding a scientist, collecting samples, and potentially finding a cure to the zombie plague. So there's that, all that hope is built in, and you could end that mission and be like, oh, well, we solved this apocalypse we were playing right now. And there are other apocalypses in the board game and and it translates to the RPG that are like, it's just a story about the people. It's just a story about this cult, or it's just a story about this region. So I really think it's up to the GM and what they're trying to accomplish. The great thing about Maximum Apocalypse is if you solve one apocalypse, you can always bring in another one and tear it down and start a new campaign.
Still 10 more.
Yeah, there's still 10 or 11 more, however many guys said there were.
That's it. It's like, you beat Godzilla. Yeah. You think the kaiju are gone? Yep, they are. Now the aliens arrive because you killed all of the kaiju and it's safe.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like anything. I mean, if you have a happy ending at the end that ultimately solves everything, I mean, you know, whether it's D&D or Maximum Apocalypse or a post-apocalyptic game, I mean, why are the players still playing with those characters? Yeah. You know, if you do have an ending, that's fine, but that is the ending. And certainly an appropriate ending to an apocalyptic world is, you know, establishing some sort of civilization or city or settlement that can be the new civilization moving forward.
Absolutely.
But you know, an ending's an ending, so it depends on if you want to end it. If players want to keep going with their characters, you obviously can't give that to, you know, if you do that, then you're sure stuck.
There's a question here from Jimmy James, and I don't know. Do you have any tips for designing text-based sessions, trying it for first time on Discord? Have either of you had an experience? Because I've had experience, but it was in 1997.
I mean, it reminds me of those old computer games that were all text, and it was like describe something, you type something in, and you had to phrase it exactly right.
King's Quest back in the day. Was
King's Quest
text.
Or like any of those. There was like an Amnesia one, which was strictly text. Like King's Quest at least had some graphics.
That's true. That's true.
But there was this one like Amnesia, which was just like black and white text. And I remember my buddy and I sitting in a basement trying to figure it out. And you needed the damn manual because it was so archaic. If you typed like search the couch, that was like wrong. And you had to say like, you know, lift up the, you know, like it was like you had to type exactly the way you wanted it, or it was, you know, wouldn't give you an answer. It would say like that command doesn't work.
Yeah. Recently, though, for those of us not born before the apocalypse.
Well, so I've been using a lot of Discord. I haven't really done a play-by-text game, so I'm not sure that I'm necessarily the best to answer it. But I am aware of them, and I did like a sort of writing experiment style thing many years ago, where I would like I'd do like a sentence or two, and like send that, and then the next person would write the next, like they would do like reactions, and we'd essentially write back and forth, and sort of have like things. I'm not really sure, like honestly, because like I have my Discord channel, and I actually even have a # like play-by-post channel there, so you could do that, but nobody's using it. But I think like I think that the main thing is just sort of establishing like a set of rules, right? Because like with all games, you have to have like a structure, like a backbone to it. And so if you have the skeleton on how to play it, right, you're like, okay, you can type like 2 things or 3 things, and you have to let other people speak, you know. It sort of lends, if you have that sort of thing, then it lends somebody like, okay, I'm going to write everything I want to say in like, you know, a block, like a text. And Discord automatically has a set limit. You know, you can't type too much before it like cuts you off. So you can be like, okay, that's your text block, and then the next person gets to react to that. So I think that's the way you do it. I know that I was doing one little event for Gordonak, shout out to Jeremy and his game, for Gordonak on his channel, and we were testing like this sort of thing. And he just kind of let us do whatever, and it kind of led to some chaos. But if nobody spoke for a little while, he would step in and be like, okay, at so-and-so, like what is your character doing at this time? You know, that kind of thing. And he'd be like, okay, guys, you can do like one thing today, and then I'll give you the reactions, and then we'll go on to the next things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you just have to have like a structure, and then it'll work just fine.
That's it, a structure. And I think there's lots of different variations as well. There's Discord play, which is play by post, which has a very different meaning. I have a very good friend. He used to play by post where it was actually a written letter, which he would post to the game master, who would then post. I mean, that's why
it's called post.
Exactly. 1994, 95, I think, around about there. So there's play by post, which is little post things, and those can move fairly quickly.
Yes.
Then there's PBEM, which was play by email.
Yep, that's what I was doing.
That's
for
what
writing.
I started with in 1996, except I didn't have internet in those days. My friend did. So he would get all the emails, he would copy them onto Stiffy disk, bring them to high school, give them to me. I would then read them all, write my response, copy it back onto Stiffy disk, give it to him the next day, then he'd take it. So it depends on I mean, that's really going way back, but those were some of my fondest memories, because there you were writing a page and a half of response, because every major action took place in a week of real time. So you had a week within which to respond to whatever situation was going on. So I think there's lots of people.
Situation in the story only took like 5 seconds.
Yes, absolutely. And then everyone had a week to respond to those 5 seconds, right? But it was about camaraderie and that sort of stuff. So I think it's really about finding the system that works for you. And also, the person who's running it, I know, has to be incredibly active. Whether it's the email or Discord or whatever, they have to be driving that. So there we are. All right, so we're getting to the end of today's session for the regular hour, which is questions and answers, and hanging out with these guys. So just quickly, Michael, where can people find more info about what you do? And do you have a Twitter handle? Do you, or is it Rock Manor Games that they should be looking at?
Rockmanorgames.com is certainly like the central point for all things Rock Manor Games, but my personal Twitter is at mgnade. So Gnade is my last name. That's how you spell it. So just M for Michael in front of that, and you'll find me. But Rock Manor Games links to all that stuff. We're Rock Manor Games on Facebook. We're Rock Manor Games on YouTube. We're Rock Manor Games on Instagram. Yep, that's the Twitter handle that you just posted. So
thank God.
If people want to tweet or ask me any questions about stuff, I'm there. I'm not super active on Twitter, but I'll see it.
There you go. Absolutely. And Scott, you've got something coming up. Can I share that with the folks?
Yeah, for sure. If you guys are available. So we've got this. I made this. So we were supposed to go to Origins Online. That sort of didn't work out.
We're supposed to go to Original Origins.
We're supposed to go to Original Origins and then Origins Online, and then that sort of thing. But so what I'm doing is instead during that same block of time, the 19th to 20th, doing a couple of like games, like a little. For me, on my time, it would be a breakfast game, a lunch game, but it would be different in people's different time zones. But sort of throw in, so there's on the 19th 2 games, on the 20th 2 games, and then there's like extra things, like a little watch party for Not Great RPG who's going to be running Maximum Apocalypse on their channel, or backers who want to play in some Maximum Apocalypse. So people that are Kickstarter backers, they get a slot. If they want to be in it, then they get a chance. There's only one person signed up right now, so there's 5 open slots.
How do we sign up?
So the thing is that for this one, I'm trying to control everything through Discord. So you'd have to go to my Discord channel, which is for the RPG. You can easily find that going to discord.me/MARPG, and it'll allow you to join the server from there.
.me/?
Yep, MARPG. And that'll link to, there's discord.me is a website that keeps Discord channels up there, and you can, it'll go right to it. It'll be a description, and there'll be a little button to click join this Discord server, join server, and so you can do that way. You go there, and then there's a sign up channel. You can sign up and get in, and if you are a backer, then you just have to let me know. You can waitlist yourself for that game, and then I can go in and change it and put you in the actual game itself. But I'm just sort of controlling it through Discord right now because it's easier that way. When you have Facebook and you have Instagram and you have Twitter and you have Discord and people sign up on all those different things, I've lost control before. So
plus we're doing that virtual gaming con, which is using Discord.
Oh yeah,
so we may as well get used to it.
yeah. And so virtual gaming con is the week after, and that's through their website. You have to go to virtual gaming con.
It's on VG. It's on Board Game Geek.
On Board Game Geek, yeah. And there's a Discord.
They've got
channel.
a pretty big link at the top.
Yep. So those are 2 ways in the next couple of weeks to come in and try some Maximum Apocalypse. Like I said, there's 2 games on each day, so 4 total games are open to anybody. If you want to try it out, you can come try it out.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I created a character whilst I was prepping. I was reading your rules, and I was kind of creating this character, and I created this surgeon scientist sort of individual, and it was just so much fun. I don't think they would do very well at anything. I am the world's worst min maxer. I basically am just a minner. I just create very bad characters, but they have so much flavor. And it's like, oh, well, she was a scientist, but she really screwed up. And or she was a doctor and she killed someone. So she had to move into into science to do research. But she wasn't very good at that, So anyway, right.
Well,
so
and you'll have to try the character out and see if it works.
I was going to say Maximum Apocalypse, one of the things that when I first played Maximum Apocalypse, after hearing Todd and Scott talking RPG gibberish in some ways where I just wasn't understanding what they were talking. The things I did understand were things like, they were saying that there's this rules light trend in RPGs. Right. And then there's these super old school, like crunchy stuff, which like Todd especially was hard for into. And he really wanted to create something in the middle because he hates games that are too rules light. They don't feel like they're complete games. But he also, obviously the super crunchy, like archaic number crunching stuff isn't fun in modern day stuff.
Absolutely.
And you guys also always talked about how you wanted people to be good. If you weren't good at combat, like you were still good at something.
Yeah,
and
you could still contribute somehow.
Yeah, like after playing
my
first session of MMORPG, I had someone. I literally did 0 damage. I did nothing in combat. I had a thief. What was it, Scott? A thief something else?
I think you were like a thief scientist or something like that.
Thief scientist, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was damn good at cracking open locks, man. I was like destroying locks and getting us into everywhere. So it's not like I felt like I didn't contribute at all.
Yeah.
And I was really agile, so like nothing could hit me. But I was sort of like a cat burglar, like moving around, dodging stuff. And then if we need to get in anywhere, I would just come in and smash it open. Like just amazing successes like crazy on lockpicks.
Well, like I said, I just got so excited. I was like, okay, cool. Here's my character. Nothing higher than 60%, but that's okay. That's okay. She's fine. Guys, it's been an absolute blast having you on, and thank you for answering all of our questions, as weird as some of them might have been. So yes, I really do appreciate having you through. If you haven't backed the Kickstarter yet, I have shared the link. You've made your goal almost twice over already, which I think is fantastic. And you've still got 17 days to go. So I think it's a case of just wishing you guys the best of luck. And I mean, when I look at that Kickstarter, you guys, it's not a huge jump to get in. That's something that I was like, how are they doing this? I mean, you're giving away the book for $20. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, from my perspective, I'll just like go about it. Like when I was talking to Mike, I wasn't sure where we were going to go with like the prices.
Yeah.
But like we got into talking and it sounded like he and I were both on like the same page. Like we wanted to make sure that like the digital content was available. And, we're currently in this like sort of COVID-19, like, BLM stuff, like world where like people aren't necessarily like having tons of money. And so like trying to make it so that we were being affordable, I think was definitely like when Mike was talking to me like, hey, let's do this. I was like, yeah, that's great. I think a lot of people would be fine with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was just going to say that I looked at Kids on Bikes, which was like much less pages than us, but around the same price point. Mm-hmm. And after getting quotes, I was like, dude, we can match that. Let's match that.
Nice. Nice. I need to speak to you about who your publisher is, because I've got another book coming out soon, and I'm like, how do they get it that low? Tell me this. Anyway, it's been brilliant, guys. Thank you so much for being on the show. For those of you still with me, we will be doing reviews of those entries shortly. I just have to reset everything for that particular session. So stay with me. We will be back in a few minutes. I also need to go and grab some more coffee because I have run out. Well, not coffee. I gave up caffeine 3 days ago. It has been hell, but I am finally at the point where today it was 0 caffeine. So yay. To put you in the picture, I drink 14 cups of coffee a day on average.
Whoa.
So it's been a big cutout. Anyway. All right, guys, it's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Fun.
We'll be back. We'll be back shortly. Cheers, everyone. Okay, and I'm back. Wow. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I mean, I don't often have guests coming up, and when I do, there's always that nervousness that you have when you have people coming onto your show that you haven't met before. And you're like, are they going to be any good or not? I don't know. I'm not so sure. And these guys were great. They answered and they really went through. And I think really, I kind of was chatting to them half an hour before we went live, and I was like, okay, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that, and questions will be coming through. So there you are. But I thought it was really interesting and lots of info there. So yeah, it's always good to have people on. I know we're lining up. I've got one more guest who's going to join us sometime this month for the new launch of a new series that we'll be doing on the channel from next month moving forward. So that should be exciting. But anyway, okay, that's not why we're here any longer, I should say. We're here to talk about your submissions for the Circle of World Builders. Now, these are the 5 steps that we are currently using as our modus operandi, I should say, for creating our adventures on the channel. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, head on over to the main channel. That's youtube.com/howtobeagreatgamemaster, all one long word, and you can find that there. That's the template we're talking about. Now, we're talking about the submissions that were given in during the Circle of World Builders event that happened 2 weeks ago. I've made a playlist now that you can find all those videos, but as individual videos rather than as the gigantic 12-hour marathon that it was. So there is that to look at. But you can also submit if you are a patron. If you join our Patreon, and that's patreon.com/greatgamemaster, you can submit your stories as well, and I will go through and review those. So there is a process for that. Okay, if you still have questions, go ahead, ask your questions. Big word question in front though, please, that would be useful. So Desmond says, can non-patrons see your Star Wars game? Yes, you can, but not yet. Not yet. Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you. There are players, and then there are players. There are people who claim to have good technology, and then there are people who actually have good technology. So whenever I do these kinds of games with unknown elements, and that's not to say it's bad, one just has to be cautious. So I didn't want to say that it was definitely going to get broadcast or it definitely wasn't going to get broadcast. I kind of hedged my bets, but I had so much fun on Friday that I think that I would love to see what people think about the game. So we will definitely put the game up. I'm just waiting. We're going to be playing again in 2 weeks' time. So yes, it will go up. Don't you worry. It really will. So, and I think, yeah, well, I think we were laughing the whole way through, and that for me is a really good gauge of a good game. Is if you're laughing. I mean, obviously, if it's like the serious death thing, I think you should still be laughing about how fun and cool and amazing the serious death thing is. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But anyway, okay, we are going through your stuff, and that's not what you want to see. You want to see this folder where these are the submissions. So we finished last week's submission. We're now going to open up this one. Devil Worship and Missing Villages is the name of this particular event. And I must just move your stuff away so I can still see what's going on. Okay, so Devil Worship and Missing Villages. Remember, the questions that we want to be able to ask and answer are the 5 W's and 1 H. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. So, pieces are traveling through the woods. Okay, they are attacked close to the village they are traveling to by a hellhound. Okay, hellhound roaming the woods. Right, so straight off the bat, we've got an interesting situation here where instead of having 2 beats in the adventure, we've only got 1. So the PC's traveling through the woods and they are attacked close to the village they're traveling to. That is actually part of the combat section. So in the S and in the C, that is part of the combat. We would still need a social beforehand. That social beforehand could very simply be, and I don't know, I haven't read these beforehand, so I don't know where the story is going, but it could very well be that the Hellhound, you know, that, let me just make it the view, nice view, boom, boom, boom. Where the hell is page display? What? Zoom. I just wanted to show the whole bloody page. No, it doesn't matter. Okay, well, there we go. You get to see what it is. What's this? Oh, that's the rule book. Okay, so the way to solve this is very, very, very simple. The social is the PCs bump into a woman who has been burned to death, a corpse on the road. Then they come across a deer that has been burned to death. What is going on in this wood? We don't know. And so then when a hellhound attacks, aha, now suddenly we understand why. So do you see how the two link into each other? Whereas in this case, there's no indicator that there's a build up to it. It's just they're traveling and then they get attacked. By putting in they're traveling and discover burnt bodies, then that works. Because it builds tension. It's still social. They can do skill checks. They can try and medicine it. They can try and work out what they died from. All that kind of wonderful stuff. But then they get attacked by the Hellhound. Okay, so I've been shouted at by GM Brightside. You didn't check for PC names. There are no PC names. So unless you have a friendly Grizzles who's going to be throwing PC names, NPC names at you during your show, that's a sad point. Okay, it's not a bad point. It's just about making your life easier. All right, so they get attacked by hellhounds roaming the woods. So what is the question on everybody's mind? Where did the hellhound come from? Why did it attack the party? If it's the fallback is because it's chaotic evil and it's just going to attack the party, okay, fine. But where did it come from? Who put it there? And why is it there in the woods in the first place? And then how did it get there? They don't generally wander around inside woods. So those are all of the questions that we are currently, as the players, going, okay, what is the story? So we arrive in the village. Everybody is scared and suspicious. Townsfolk went missing. None to be seen again. Aha! Townsfolk are missing. Hellhound roaming around in the woods. Suspicion of devil-worshipping cult. Didn't need to spell it out for us. That was nice and clear. Cult member when in his home. Okay, so this is a combat, sure. So there was a combat with the cult member when in his home. But we don't know how we got there. We don't know how... Where is the journey to the cult member in his home? So it could be suspicion of blacksmith of being a devil worshipper, because he works with fire all the time. So then the blacksmith is the combat in his home. Okay, so then they kill the blacksmith, and then they discover, oh, wait a minute, the blacksmith lives in a small hovel, but there's indications of a larger cult. Okay, that makes sense. But it's not a twist on the plot, right? It is a bigger. So what I would do here is I would say the blacksmith is in his home with the hellhound. So when the party then kills him and the hellhound, job done, thank you very much for playing, game over, we win. Or so they think. Because this sentence should actually be up here, and we don't need the indications of a larger cult. What we need here is, and now, more villagers keep going missing. Ah, he was not what we thought he was. Well, he was, but he was only one part of it. Suddenly it's bigger. So remember, when we are doing this transition from the journey to the plot to discover that it's not the plot, we need to make sure that it is very, very clear that there's a shift, and it's got to change gears. It's got to go from point A to point Z almost. It's got to shift all the way around, and we go, oh, it's not what I thought. It's not just an escalation. Because if it's just an escalation, then what happens is it feels like you're making a big adventure. It feels like you're making this really cool adventure. But what happens is from a player perspective, it's, well, no, it's not 1, it's 5. And you're like, well, we've killed 1 already. Now we have to kill 5. Whereas it's not 1, it's actually something else completely. Then the players are like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Aha, clever GM, right? So there's a trap on the trapdoor. Sure, that is a combat. That's absolutely fine. Journey through small dark tunnel into larger cavern, but we need to learn something more. Okay? Traps and more traps. Okay. Here's a good learning lesson. When you have 2 of the same, it's not good. 2 of the same is a repeat. We do not want repeats. Remember, it's a bad idea to repeat, unless it's a repeat and a difference. But I don't see that indicated here necessarily. Could be because time was short when these submissions were being done. But it's a repeat. Repeats are bad. So this journey down this dark tunnel, why isn't it maybe we're talking cultists, right? So what if it was little devil imps or little stone carvings of devils which come alive and attack? That would be still a combat, but it wouldn't be a repeat. Okay. Kill ritual with human sacrifice and devil summoning. Kill cultists and fiends. Rescue the prisoners. So it's a dark ritual, and then they do that. All right. So that finishes off. What I will say about this is, if you look at it on its, and this is where you can step back. And you can say, okay, from a total perspective, this is an adventure. There was a hellhound that attacked in the woods, and it led to the village, and the village has now led us to the giant cultists. So this is definitely an adventure. It's workable. It would service the job, and players might sit back and go, well, this was fun. I enjoyed this. But there wasn't a significant shift from what we expected to what we got. And I think that would have punched it up another level. It would have brought it up to the next level. What would that next level be? So when we hear devil cult, okay, cool. We think devil cult, there's 2 ways that my mind goes. Either it is a real devil cult, or it is someone who's impersonating a devil cult to hide something bigger. So that's what I would have driven this at, is perhaps it isn't a devil cult. Maybe the blacksmith was a devil worshipper, and he did have the hellhound. But perhaps where he got the hellhound from is a more interesting question, because that wasn't solved. Why would there be a hellhound wandering around? Why would the devil worshippers let it go out free, right? What if this blacksmith was given the hellhound by a mysterious stranger? Take this dog and look after it, and I'll pay you 1,000 gold pieces. Blacksmith takes it. He's a bit of a devil worshipper. He's got a few little things going on. But behind the scenes, there is actually a dark presence who is trying to obliterate the entire village and make it look like it was devil worshippers, when in actual fact it was just someone trying to buy the land cheaply. Or it was dwarves who wanted to mine and the villagers refused to sell the village. So we could then build that in, for example. And the dwarves got the hellhound because in mining under the village, they discovered this dark portal, which gave them this weird stuff, which would help them to dig even more or to open up their mining operations or something along those lines. I mean, so it's always about that kind of perspective, about sitting back and going, okay, well, this is serviceable. This will work. But let's take it up a notch. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Is anyone watching? I mean, have I been muted this entire time? I don't know. I'm looking at chat, and the chat's like, there we go. We are not saying anything for like 5 minutes. Oh my God. Anyway, but yes. So that's my take on this one. Serviceable, but I feel it could have gone more. I feel it could have gone more. We're here. Okay. It works well. All right. So that's that one. We've got 4 minutes left. We've got 4 minutes left. Let me do another one quickly. All right. So I'm going to delete that so that I don't do it again. So let's do this one. Is there lots? Oh boy. Oh boy. Over the Edge and Beyond. I like that. Over the Edge and Beyond. Okay. So this is, I mean, the title is interesting, right? The amount of plus signs that I see is worrying, because that means lots of text. This is not meant to be lots of text. This is meant to be crib notes for you, but okay, maybe that's good. We've got some nice rewards. Ragnaror, the female Dragonborn warrior. Twig, the gnomish major domo of the Cartographer's Lodge in Clifton at the Edge. Greenspittle, the Thrigmarax, the dark elf. Thrigmarax, the dark elf necromancer searching for ways to create light. Okay, cool. All right, so these are not random, as Isongbird 246010 points out. So absolutely. But I think that might have been a misinterpretation of what the form was asking for in terms of random NPCs. It might have been misinterpreted. Nonetheless, that's not what we're testing here. We are testing to see whether or not the adventure is any good. We've got some interesting rewards. Telbano's Ring of Unconditional Friendship. 3 more wooden masks of many tongues. Guest rights at the Dragonborn title if they bring the dragon scale shields to their fallen warriors back to the tribe. And I sense more. Remark for my players, some of the races are unknown as they do not exist in Midgard 5th edition. That was the Viking expansion book that came out. I think it was a Kickstarter at some point, if I recall correctly. Anyway, didn't get into it, but there we go. Okay. Oh boy. So, PCs have to pass the initiation test of the Major Domo of the Cartographer's Lodge in Clifton at the Edge to become guild apprentices. And their initiation test is to be sent over the Edge after the missing guild team. Okay. That's not bad, assuming that the players want to become part of the guild, but that's fine. So they have to go over the Edge, right? So what do we expect? To go over the Edge, to find that the lost guild or missing guild team members have had their ropes cut or are being kidnapped by something. Let's see. Running into an attempted kidnap on the way to Clifton at the Edge. Hopefully rescuing the major domo of the local cartographers guild in the process. Okay. So this potentially could happen first before the PCs have to pass the initiation test. It could be quite a nice way to link the PCs into becoming cartographers. So that could be quite nice. That's how my brain is interpreting the logic here. Journey to plot, which is go and find the missing guild team. Negotiate passage across the foggy marshes with a troop of kobolds and find a few pages from a journal pointing towards the stronghold of a malicious tribe of Dragonborn. Assumedly, that's where the missing guildmen have gone. The tribe of Dragonborn is preparing a group of warriors for a sortie and is looking for someone to be sacrificed in a ritual duel to ensure good luck. I love that entrance. Look at that. It's a piece of culture about the Dragonborn. Before they go into battle, they have to sacrifice someone to make sure that there's good luck. That has been done by humankind for thousands of years. We slaughter the ox to make sure we can have better oxen next year. We slaughter the goat so we get more food, etc., etc. It's brilliant. It's wonderful. In one little sentence, okay, it's a fairly long sentence, but in one sentence, we instantly know the Dragonborn are superstitious, they're ritualistic, they are cold-blooded and don't care about who they kill, and it gives us this great combat. All right, so the Dragonborn are not involved in the vanishing of the guild team, but they suspect that the skeleton kobolds, it is a repeat of these kobolds in the mist. But anyway, who recently appeared on Oprah Winfrey. No, who recently appeared on a nearby island are a sign of evil forces being on the loose. My disconnect is we're trying to kill you. Oh, and by the by, there's skeleton kobolds. So I think the author is assuming the players win. They win this ritualistic duel, which means that the Dragonborn should not go on their sortie. It is a bad omen, I'm assuming. And then the Dragonborn say, well, there's skeletal kobolds on the island. Now I don't mind the repeat of the kobolds who were helping them through the marshes, but I think that if we say in the sentence, with a troop of kobolds who are complaining of having lost members themselves and so are eager to help the guild find their members in the hopes of finding their own, that would be brilliant foreshadowing as to the skeleton kobolds. All right. Dueling with a Dragonborn warrior to third wound on the hilltop in a thunderstorm at night. If the volunteering PC survives, the PCs gain the right to go with the Dragonborn to fight the skeleton kobolds. Okay, lovely. I think that's really cool. I think that ties together quite nicely. Again, though, what's been missed? The plot is not the plot. So that shake-up, that escalation is not happening. So when we countered the Dragonborn, we didn't get a change of gear. We just discovered that these are skeleton kobolds, right? So we're still on the same journey. We're still going in the same direction. This is not a bad thing. But oftentimes we have to be careful that if we just stick on this route, we end up with very linear adventures. Now, this is a workable adventure so far. Very, very straightforward. It does all of the things it needs to do. But it is incredibly linear. So at the moment, I'm looking for the change. Where does it change? We haven't got that yet. Finding the journal of the guild team with hints of a valley of shadows and one wooden mask of many tongues on the island of the skeleton kobolds. Okay, let's see what happens. Fight the skeleton kobolds on the island at their sacred place where they worship a female elven statue carved from white marble with shiny eyes of purple gemstones. It is a journey, yes, and we have definitely got there. Deciphering a safe route through the flesh-eating vine at the entrance of the Valley of Shadows from an entry in the guild's journal, fighting their way through shadow sentries and finding the dead guild team just being converted into shadows by the dark elven necromancer in her laboratory. Okay. So, another... like I said, this is a very workable adventure. The guild members are missing. Where are the guild members? Where are the guild members? Where are the guild members? There are the guild members. Finished. Okay. Let's start backwards. So let's start with that final sequence. The guild members are being converted into shadows by the dark elven necromancer in her laboratory. Why? Why is she converting them into shadows? What does she want in this area? Now, there was a hint of it down here. Thrigmarax, a dark elf necromancer, searching for ways to create light resistance for her race to conquer the lands. Okay, I didn't get that. And maybe I missed it, but I didn't get that at all. But let's say that is her goal, is to find this light resistance. Okay, and she is creating these shadows she's trying to draw something from the bodies of these individuals. She's trying to merge what the gnomes have on their skin with other dark elves. That would be my guess. I mean, that's how you find a way of, how do you test if you have a cure for exposure to sunlight? Yeah, inject whatever it is, or you infuse, or you magic onto whatever they are onto the dark elves. So what I would do is I would have these weird dark elf hybrids. Okay? Here, where we discover it's not the plot. Instead of the Dragonborn saying, "It is not us, it is the skeleton kobolds on that island over there," which is just a redirect of the party. Have this ritual, which is beautiful, have this ritual interrupted by these bizarre dark elf shadow morphed human kobold hybrid things. And they attack the party and try and drag the party to the dark elf. The party will kill them. So yes, we have this beautiful duel, but I would argue that this duel could happen in here. Well, this duel is actually, it should be happening in here anyway, right? So this is the journey to plot when they discover that it is not the plot, right? So then I would have these weird hybrid things attacking here, and then your journey is tracing where these dark hybrid things came from, and that gives you whatever it is here that you want, the Valley of Shadows, which is then when they're attacked by regular drow or regular dark elves. And so we realize, well, actually, the guild members were never the main thing. They were just an incidental. And even pushing it further, rather than the journal of the guild team, have them find 2 members of the guild who refuse to let their fellow guildies go. So they've been tracking and following. But they couldn't send message back to base home headquarters for fear of being discovered. So what that does is it says you were looking for the guild members, you've now found the guild members, but now there's something more diabolical going on that you need to get involved in. And so I would go that route. So it's a simple little twist up using what has been established in this end battle and changing it so it's not just point, but now it's point, stop. There's a whole new thing going on that had nothing to do with the beginning parts. It's so it seems, and now we're going in a different direction. So I think that is something that I would do. But I think this was a very good adventure. So there we go. Tonight we've had 2 very good linear adventures presented to us. Part of what we're trying to do on Great GM is get to Great GM, which is where I think you get that slight thing. So there we go. There we go. Let's see. What are we looking at here? Desmana says, I think I lost the original plot at some point, but I think this would work nicely when telling the story. Too much info for this note, but too few for campaign notes. Desmana, is this your adventure? That's a good question. I think that'll put things in. I feel like all things have been tried to input in this format. Yeah, I think lots of things were kind of being pushed into this, but I think it worked very well. We certainly could understand what was happening. I mean, it wasn't like we couldn't understand what was happening. It was pretty clear. And again, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Very, very workable option. So there we go. All right, let's see. Any last questions? Edward Horseman says, would you advise to use this PDF as a way of writing the very broad strokes of adventure? Yes, absolutely. So Edward, and to everybody out there, I'm looking for a writer to write an adventure with me. That's the important word. So if you are interested, head on over to our Discord. That's discord.gg/greatgm. And you'll find there GGM team, GGM team. I always forget that. GGM team. And you can join that team, submit an adventure based on the stuff that I've given you. So this 5-step is designed for you to to jot out an adventure and to test it in exactly the same way that I've been testing it, asking, where did it come from? Why was it there? What was it doing? When did it arrive? Who put it there? And why did it? You ask that of every step. And then you look at it and you say, is it linear? Is it the end and the beginning are in a straight line? Or when we get to that, discover the plot is not the real plot, is there a change of expectation where things that we thought were happening now are not going to be happening? That's not to say that linear is bad. And sometimes you can just have a linear adventure. But many times having that twist up works really well in terms of people going, oh, okay, I didn't see that coming. That was cool. So yes, this is broad strokes. This is not fine detail. If you are a planner, if you like to plan, you can then go in and take each of those lines and work through it. How do you get into that sequence? What are the NPCs in that sequence? What are the bits of dialogue that you're going to throw into that sequence? What are the maps? What are the etc., 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 for each of those blocks? Personally, I don't really do that. I look at what maps do I need for those various situations, and I will make those maps if I'm using maps online. But I won't go into the details of each of those. That's me personally, right? And I fell very short with the Star Wars game. You're going to hear this again because we're going to do a retrospective on the Star Wars game. But in the Star Wars game, what I had written as a social encounter, the players walk into the tomb of so-and-so and find data crystals or whatever it was that they found. They thought that there was a huge riddle, and I may have indicated that there might have been a riddle. I didn't have a riddle, so I had to write out this frickin' thing on the fly, and thankfully it worked out. It was okay, but I wouldn't normally do that. If I had planned for there to be a riddle, there should have been a riddle in there. That's just me being lazy and getting lucky, basically. So I advise, do what I tell you and not what I do, because I lucked out there. Having said that, it's each of us will plan more or less. So that's what I would say there. The last question for this evening is, I know I already asked one, but I'm currently in a game via Discord whilst planning one myself, and my GM is good but still fairly new to GMing. What can I as a player do to help him? You can ask more than one question in a session. You can ask as many questions as you like. What can I as a player do to help your GM who is good but fairly new to GMing? Well, I would identify what you think are weak points, because obviously you have some kind of there's something that stuck out in your mind that you went, oh, he's a new GM, he's a new GM. Maybe that's in his role-playing descriptions, or maybe that's in his rules interpretations. So I would reach out and say, hey, I loved the session. I felt that this maybe was a little bit lacking. What did I miss? Is that something that you're unfamiliar with? I know you're a new GM. Can I help you? I can help you with rules. Maybe I can help you with just test the waters and see where they are. Because what you see as, oh, it's a new GM and so they don't know what they're doing, might very well be intentional from their behalf. I often have players, especially when I'm running live games, where people think I've made a mistake, or they think I've made an error in the role-playing session somewhere. I've said something that is contrary to what I said earlier. And in chat, they'll say, but you said it was this before. I would say 40% of the time, I'll look at chat and go, they're right. Okay, how do I get myself out of this one? But most of the time, it's done intentionally because I'm either testing the players to see if they are taking notes, or it is a specific falsification because the character, the NPC, is lying. That's giving them information. So sometimes it's intentional. So you've got to just test the waters and see where they are and what's going on there. No, absolutely. Look, joining the writing team, I mean, it's not a permanent thing. It's just a once-off adventure. It's a straight up write the adventure, and it definitely is. It definitely there's a reason why we're doing it. It's an experiment. It's a paid gig, so you get paid if you submit the work and it gets approved, and you get hired for that job. It's an experiment because we want to expand our library, and I've got so many projects that I want to do. I just don't have the time. So it's like, okay, well, if I come up with, I'll give the 5 steps. The writer will write it out and do the stat blocks and all that kind of stuff. And especially someone who's got good 5th edition knowledge. I don't have good 5th edition knowledge. I'll be the first one to say I don't. So when we release stuff, we want 5th edition players to go, okay, cool, this was done by someone who knows what they're doing. And yeah, so that's kind of the space we're in. But I mean, we've all got to find our own path and be on our own journey. So yeah, Ben Nicholson said, be supportive but not overbearing, and certainly not a know-it-all. Don't correct them in game. Certainly have a chat with them afterwards. But yeah, it's about determining what was intentional, what was not intentional, and if they want help. Some GMs might say, no, I don't want any help. I want to learn this on my own. Oh, okay. So there we are. Folks, I've had a lot of fun tonight. It's been a super long session, but yeah, I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. We will see you on Wednesday. I'm trying to think now. I know that I am doing a Maximum Apocalypse playthrough. Michael Kesevan, the Dead Aussie Gamer, is going to be GMing it, but that's the 1st of July. So I will see you on Wednesday for From the Shadowborn, which I think is going to be fun. It's going to be a fun episode. So there we go. Yeah, we'll see you on Wednesday. Until then, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.